About 1 year after the Jackbox Party Pack was released, we got a sequel, the Jackbox Party Pack 2, containing 5 brand new party games to play. This series is still one of my favorite ways to have a good laugh with some friends, but unfortunately, it had a rough start, with Pack 1 just not being that great. It had games that, while okay for the time, just haven't really aged that well, since many of the later party packs have gone on to completely blow them out of the water, and also this pack contained WordSpud. So if this first pack was so lame to go back to these days, and Pack 2 came out just 1 year later, could it possibly hold up any better? Well, for starters, this pack did make a few key enhancements to the series as a whole. Starting in Pack 2, most games now come with a new audience feature that lets up to 10,000 people contribute to your game in minor ways, even if the actual game is full or has already started. Oh man, I bet this will be a great way to engage my audience! There's also a new family-friendly toggle for some games, and the new VIP feature, making it so that only the first player that joins the game can start said game, and can you believe this wasn't a thing in the first pack? Back then, any player that joined could control whatever the hell they wanted, starting the game, opening random menus, it was fucking mayhem over there. So those are some great new features that have stuck around ever since, but are the 5 games in this pack actually good? Something interesting to think about is, yeah, Pack 1 was easily the worst in the series, but to this day, Pack 3 is often still looked at as one of the best in the series, leaving Pack 2 to be the midpoint of the series' rise to its prime. So, landing directly between the worst pack in the series and the potential best, which way does Pack 2 lean? Well, let's find out.
Yeah, let's find out, right? Oh man, I can't wait to play these games. This is gonna be awesome.
Pete, yeah, just like last time, we still don't have enough people here to get a Jackbox session going, so I'm gonna have to play with some friends on Discord. You can't play.
You know what, man? I knew you'd say something like that. Oh, we need more people or we can't play. Well, that's where these people come in.
Holy fucking god, alright. Pete, get these fucking people out of here. This is the creepiest shit I've ever seen.
Come on, don't be such a flapjack, man. It's summer break and all their parents are busy at work right now. We're just playing Jackbox, Flish. There's nothing creepy about it. So, you guys, ready to play some Bidiots?
Alright, so, let's begin with Fibbage 2, for fuck's sake. Starting off the second pack, we've got Fibbage 2, the first ever sequel game in the Jackbox series. Starting here, the first game in every party pack is a sequel to a previous one, which means that technically every new pack contains 4 original games and 1 recycled one. I wouldn't say that's a bad thing though, it's fun to see the different iterations of certain games as the series goes on, and hey, of all the shitty games from Pack 1 they could have brought back for Pack 2, Fibbage XL was easily the most deserving. It was my favorite game in the pack, and the one I had the least complaints about. Now as for Fibbage 2, well, it's basically Fibbage XL, but again, just like the original, the game gives you a fill-in-the-blank trivia question about some obscure fact or event, and it's your job to come up with a fake answer to that question that everyone else will think is correct. Once everyone submits their answers, they're all displayed on the screen, with the actual correct answer heading among them. Players are awarded points for finding the real answers, but are also rewarded for fooling others with their made-up answers. At the end of the game, the player with the most points is the winner. That's about all there is to it, and yeah, I mean, it is literally the exact same gameplay as Fibbage XL from Pack 1, with like, no changes at all. But it is still a pretty fun and straightforward game that I always enjoy playing. It's as satisfying as ever to make up some ridiculous bullshit that ends up tricking everyone, and it's still just as fun to learn about these weird-ass true events as it was in the original too. It's a good time for sure, but it's like almost beat for beat the exact same experience as the game I already played in Pack 1. Here's the thing about these Jackbox sequel games. I don't have a problem with them being a thing, in fact I think they're mostly good, but they never really strive to revamp the original games with major changes or improvements like you might expect. I'd argue that instead, they serve as more of an excuse to revisit these old concepts, with some slight alterations, but ultimately leaving the gameplay unchanged. I mean, taking a look at the Fibbage series, there are currently 4 of these sprinkled throughout the party packs, and none of them are really that different from Fibbage XL and Pack 1. You get pretty much the same experience playing any of these. As someone who buys every pack and intends to for as long as they keep coming out, yeah, it can sometimes be a bit lame to know that a handful of the games I'm paying for are just essentially clones of each other with different skins, but I can definitely see the good in this decision. For starters, despite what I just said, I still think it can be cool to see old classics come back with a new art style, and especially new gameplay changes, the ones that are more substantial anyway. More importantly though, not everyone is gonna buy every party pack, which means that if you're someone who only wants to buy 1 or 2 packs, the similarity between the different iterations of each game is entirely in your benefit. If you were looking to buy your first party pack, and you know that you absolutely want a pack that has a Fibbage game in it, because there are so many sequels, you're not restricted to buying the shitty first pack that contains Fibbage XL and WordSpud. You've got 4 different packs to choose from that all have a different variation of Fibbage. And because the sequels barely innovate on the gameplay at all, and are mostly only different in terms of visuals, you won't really be pressured to buy the pack that includes the most recent variant. It's not like it's the definitive version or anything, they're all pretty much the same, so you basically get the freedom to pick between 4 different packs based on which one's other 4 games appeal to you you the most. If every pack contained 5 brand new games with no sequels to previous ones, yeah, we'd have much more variety, but the people who only care to own one specific party pack game would be forced to buy the sole pack that includes it rather than having a few options. Likewise, if these sequels actually did drastically improve on the concept of the games they were following, you might feel like you have to buy the pack including the latest and most refined version, whether the other games in the pack appeal to you or not. So all in all, I get why these sequels are a thing and why they don't change a lot about their originals. But the reason I even bother discussing this at all is because, man, of all the sequels in the Jackbox series, Fibbage 2 is easily the least different from its predecessor. I'm talking the gameplay, the visuals, everything. It is a damn near copy and paste job, honestly. Most Jackbox sequels will of course change the prompt lineup, but may also largely revamp the art style and maybe add a couple of twists to the gameplay here and there to keep things fresh. Art style wise, Fibbage 2 looks like Fibbage XL's maternal twin. It looks like some dumbass 3rd grader snuck into the Fibbage XL studio and splattered some paint everywhere, and that's about it. Mr. Eyeballs also makes an appearance, but besides that, the visuals of these two games are very, very similar. The questions that appear in this game are different from the ones in the original, I had to assume, and some of these questions are randomly given a bunch of extra attention with unique theming, like this road trip question that does this whole song and dance about, oh yeah baby, it's a road trip question, and then it just functions the same exact way as any other question, so I don't really know why they did that. The only actual gameplay change present here is the new defibrillator feature. Once per game, each player gets the option to use the defibrillator to eliminate all but 2 answers from their selection. The real answer and one player-made answer, giving them a 50-50 shot at a correct guess. It's a pretty decent feature that'll help you if you're lagging behind, but I always sort of forget this thing exists. It's a neat option to have, but I don't know, I just find it more fun to weed out the correct answers myself. Fibbage 2 also includes the new audience feature, and while I'm sure it's a great thing to experience in your games, I really wouldn't know. But you see, in Fibbage 2, there's this thing you can do each round where you can leave a thumbs up on other players' answers that you found amusing, and whoever gets the most of these throughout the game gets a silly little trophy at the end. This happened to the original Fibbage 2, but in this one, up to 200 people in the audience can thumbs up their favorite answers throughout the game alongside the actual players. This has no effect on the final scores or the winner, but it's still a fun little thing for spectating players to contribute to the game with. Oh, and also, when you join the Fibbage 2 lobby, you get this option to choose which sound effect plays whenever you do something in the game. Yeah. At the end of the day, Fibbage 2 is Fibbage XL again. It makes less changes than any other sequel in the Jackbox series does to their original games, but honestly, I don't mind that. Fibbage XL was my favorite game in the first pack, there wasn't really much I'd change about it, and hey, some Jackbox sequels actually end up freaking worse than their predecessors in my opinion, so it's at least good that Fibbage 2 is just as much fun as the first. I will say though, being one of the currently 4 Fibbages to pick from, Fibbage 2 is in my opinion the most forgettable one in the series. I mean, Fibbage XL is the first one, Fibbage 4 is currently the most recent one, and Fibbage 3 is generally considered the best one, leaving Fibbage 2 kinda awkwardly sitting in the middle with nothing really special about it besides the defibrillator, which I personally don't even care about. It's still Fibbage, it's still a good game, and despite the insignificance of the improvements, I do still prefer it over Fibbage XL. But as someone who owns every Jackbox pack, the odds of me deliberately choosing to open up pack 2 to play Fibbage 2 are like non-existent. It's a fine enough game, just pretty irrelevant to me at this point. Earwax. If you ask me what I enjoy about playing Jackbox with friends, I'd say it's the funny moments, the laughs. There are plenty of games in the series that I still enjoy despite not necessarily being comedy-oriented experiences, but above all else, I'd say that I enjoy the funny games the most. And well, chronologically speaking, Earwax is the first game within the Party Pack series that was designed to be a funny game. It's the first game I'm covering so far that was made for the sole purpose of generating funny moments. You could say that WordSpud from Pack 1 was supposed to be a funny game, but I honestly can't even fucking tell if that was their goal or not, so Earwax it is. First funny game. And let me tell you, for being the first funny game, Earwax sure is funny. Funnily fucking god-awful. So this is how a game of Earwax goes down. Every round, one of the players is randomly selected to be a judge. The judge gets to pick a prompt for all the other players, who then have to create the funniest possible response to that prompt by selecting 2 sound effects from a random list of 6. After everyone picks 2 sound effects to go with a given prompt, the group then gets the pleasure of hearing everyone's submissions play out one by one, each consisting of their first chosen sound being played, followed by their second chosen sound being played. After everyone's responses are heard, the judge gets to pick which one they enjoyed the most, which awards that player a point. The game ends when one of the players becomes the first to receive 3 points, and thus wins the game. To put it simply, it's sort of like Cards Against Humanity, but with sound effects. Honestly, it's a fairly clever concept that seems like it should be pretty funny, but it only takes a few rounds of playing to realize that it just doesn't really work most of the time, for a variety of reasons. First things first, the prompts. They're not good. I acknowledge that it's probably pretty difficult to come up with a bunch of prompts that lend themselves to funny sound effect answers, especially considering the sounds people can select are limited to 6 completely random options. But given that the sounds you can select are so incredibly limited and random, why are there so many specific specific ass prompts that are borderline impossible to work with. I swear, so many of these prompts feel like they were designed with exactly one potential sound combination in mind, but the odds of you randomly getting sound choices that squeeze into that paper-thin realm of possibilities are extremely slim. And not only are there incredibly specific prompts, but there are also blatantly unfunny prompts. There are prompts that literally make no sense. There are prompts that would only maybe work in any other game but this, like what hot dogs are made of. Alright, I got a question. How am I supposed to comedically describe what a hot dog is made of with fucking sound effects?
What hot dogs are made of.
So this in itself makes the game pretty challenging, because many of these prompts are just inherently difficult to work with, but that problem is greatly accentuated by the sound effects themselves. As I've been saying, you only get 6 sound effect options per round, and just like the prompts, many of them are just not that great. There are a lot of sounds in here that you're just never gonna need because they aren't all that funny or just don't really fit many situations. So when you're restricted to a combination of 2 choices from a selection of 6 random sounds that probably have no comedic value in their own right, let alone when paired with the specific ass prompt chosen by the judge, you are gonna have so many rounds of earwax when you read a prompt and then you just hear a bunch of fucking sound effects that have nothing to do with it, just pure and utter nonsense. And hell man, some of these sounds just straight up shouldn't even be here, like orgasm. Alright, listen, Jackbox Games, love your stuff, but what were we doing here, man? Why is this in the game? This might have been fine if it was like a stupid joke orgasm like "Ugh." But no, this is a realistic, long orgasm sound that isn't funny and just makes everything uncomfortable. Why is it here? But luckily, with the new family-friendly toggle available in Pack 2, you now have the option to play this game without risking hearing a literal orgasm sound effect. Yeah! But orgasms aside, the fact that a lot of these sound effects just aren't that useful is a much bigger problem when you remember that every player gets a different selection of sounds. You just kinda have to get lucky enough to be the person that gets the good sound options on the fitting prompt. It sucks, because this game would likely be a lot funnier if we could create our own sound responses using whatever comes to our heads, instead of each getting 6 different random sound choices every round that probably won't have anything to do with the prompt. And even with those 6 random choices, you can't listen to them ahead of time before submitting them, and with how vague and confusing these short descriptions can be, it is incredibly likely that the sounds you end up submitting won't sound how you imagine they would when you chose them. I understand that if players are using their phones playing in a room full of people, you can't just let everyone preview their sounds out loud for everyone else to hear. I get it, it just kinda hurts the experience a little bit. And lastly, this game can drag. The delivery of the sound effects is too slow and not punchy like you'd want them to be, and judges will often re-listen to submissions due to forgetting how they sounded after hearing so many in a row. And depending on the size of your group, it can take a long ass time for the game to end, since it only concludes once a player reaches 3 points, and submissions are anonymous. When you're in an unfunny game of Earwax and want nothing more than for it to end as soon as possible, you really feel every moment someone's awarded a point, but they weren't one of the people who were 1 away from winning, so you have to keep playing. Every time that happens means at least 1 more round of Earwax you'll have to play. It can get unbearable. So yeah, all in all, I think Earwax is a bad game. However, in recent times, much like Words Bud, I don't know man, I just can't hate it. Now don't get me wrong, this game sucks, but when you're with the right group of people, a group with a brain-dead sense of humor, the type of group that'll laugh at some fucking fart sounds, this game can be pretty funny. I refuse to give the game itself any credit for that because the laughs are never for the right reasons, but it can be pretty funny. Hearing a prompt and then hearing everyone's horrible yet honest attempts at responding to it with their atrociously limited sound choices can be absolutely hilarious, and sometimes you'll just happen to get some lucky matches. I don't think this is a good game. I would shed no tears if I was permanently banned from playing it ever again. It is absolutely on the low end of the Jackbox spectrum and is usually pretty unfunny, but every now and then, it'll catch me at just the right moment and make me laugh. So in conclusion, play something else. Bidiots is to this day one of the most complicated games in the Jackbox series. Surrounded by a bunch of pretty straightforward games, this game sticks out big time, and is still pretty hard for me to even wrap my head around while I play it. Bidiots is a drawing game taking place in an art auction. You and up to 5 other players are each given 2 prompts and will have to draw both of them to create 2 art pieces. Both of your pieces will be assigned a secret monetary value, 1 high and 1 low, but you won't be told these values. Everyone's given different prompts, but they'll all be very similar in theming, to the point where most of the resulting paintings are going to look very similar to each other. For example, one of our games had us all receiving a prompt with a driving theme. We had stuff like car accident, demolition derby, awful drivers, etc., resulting in 6 car-related paintings that could all theoretically fall under the same title. The reason for this is, after everyone's drawn their 2 paintings, it's time for the art auction, where everyone's drawings are displayed one at a time. During this portion of the game, everyone gets $3,000 and must use it to bid on these masterpieces auction style, with the goal of buying them for a lower price than the value they were initially assigned, so you can then resell them at that value for a profit. The problem is, all you get to see is the painting. You don't know the title of it or how much its monetary value is, so you'll have to do a bit of deduction to figure out how much you should bid for it to make a profit. This can be done in a couple of ways. Firstly, each player is secretly told the monetary value of 3 random painting titles. So if you see a drawing on the screen that looks like it belongs to one of these titles, then you just might know how much its value is, and thus how much you could bid on it to make a profit. However, like I said, many of these drawings will look very similar to each other due to the overarching title theme, so even if it looks like you've got the value of the current painting, be careful, because the drawing on the screen could just as easily be under a different, less valuable title that just happened to produce a really similar visual. Occasionally, you'll also be given a little hint at the bottom of your screen telling you exactly which player knows the monetary value of the current painting, encouraging you to watch how they bid to gauge whether or not you should too. Using these little hints and social cues, you gotta try your best to make as big of a profit as possible by buying high value paintings for significantly under their price. And all the while, it's also a good idea to try to trick other people into buying low value paintings for high in an attempt to waste all their money, which can be done by acting like the current painting is worth a lot when it may not be. Also, do note that if you're the artist of the painting currently being displayed, regardless of its value, you want it to sell for as high as possible, since half the money spent on your paintings goes directly to you. The bids all start at $400, and each player can one-up the current bid in $100 increments until eventually the bid gets so high that no one adds to it anymore, and someone ultimately wins it, revealing the true price of the painting and the amount of money gained or lost by the player who bought it. This process repeats for every drawing submitted, and the winner is the player with the most money at the end. That's pretty much the gist of it, but there are 2 more key features that get introduced halfway through. The first is the screw feature, returning from You Don't Know Jack. Each player gets 1 screw per game, which can be used on another player at any moment to force them to raise the current bid by $100 using their money, whether they want to or not. The only way that person can get out of buying the painting after that is if someone else decides to bid higher. This is a sick and twisted game mechanic, but I love it. What can I say? I just love screwing people over when they're too far ahead for my liking. The only shitty parts of this are that 1, you might accidentally be handing that person a high value painting, resulting in a large profit for them, so try to avoid that. And 2, if you use a screw on someone who can't afford the current bid, it just straight up wastes the screw, which I find really annoying because the game doesn't tell you how much money each player has. Just let me put them in debt. And the last feature at play in this game is the predatory loans. A ways into the game, you gain the ability to call for a $1,000 loan to use towards more bids, but for each of these loans you take out, you'll have to pay back $1,500 at the end of the game, so you should only do this if you can ensure that it will result in more profit for you at the end of the day. Alright, now that I've explained all the mechanics of the game, let's just get into it. This is probably my least favorite game of the pack. And it's unfortunate too, because honestly, everything I just explained, it all sounds pretty fun. I've got no problem with complex Jackbox games, but for as tricky as this game can be, it just doesn't do a great job balancing that with information. There is a catastrophic lack of certainty about everything going on in this game. It never feels like anyone really knows anything. Like, alright, for example, let's take this painting. Made this one myself. If this painting popped up in the game and we were all sitting here wondering how much we should bid on it, what information do we have that'll help our decision? I'll tell you all the information we don't have. We don't know what this painting's title is. We know that there are a bunch of titles that'll be similar to this painting's title, but we don't know any of those either. We know that there are a bunch of very similar looking drawings out there that can each occupy one of these titles, but we don't know what any of those other drawings look like to help us narrow down which of those titles could belong to the current drawing. And even if we've seen some of them already, we can't be certain which titles they belong to unless we just happen to get that info as one of our 3 hints. We also know that all of those possible titles have a cash value attached to them, but we don't know what any of those are either, or which value goes to what title. Just so many unknown variables here. Now again, there will be somebody playing that does know the value of this painting's title, and you might even be told that through a hint on your screen. This person knows the value of this painting, you should watch how they bid, it says. But even then, with that hint, we can't be certain that that player knows that they know the value of this painting, because from their perspective, they're still over there trying to figure out if the title they've got info on actually matches this drawing, or if it matches one they saw 3 paintings ago, or one they might see later. Even if they are somehow absolutely certain that they know this painting's exact value and bid accordingly, it still wouldn't be safe for me to follow how they bid, because I can't be certain that they aren't just pretending to know that value, or that they're even correct about it in the first place. And this hint about who to pay attention to isn't even something you get every round. Only occasionally will the game tell you who to watch, so in situations where you're not told who to watch, you won't have any idea if a person's bidding because they know the painting's value, or if they're bidding because they're the artist of the painting and just want to inflate the amount of money they'll get paid if it's bought by someone. And hell, anyone who's bidding could also very well just be doing so in hopes of tempting someone else into bidding and wasting their money on a low value art piece, whether there's someone who knows it's a low value piece, or someone who knows nothing and is just increasing the bids to trick people. So considering I shouldn't trust other people's opinions on this painting's value, and I don't have enough information myself to draw my own conclusions about its value, what do I do here? You see what I mean? It feels like there's never any real justification for bidding on any painting because I don't have a lick of concrete information about any of them. I appreciate the very few hints that were given, but they really don't help that much. The game just drags as a result of this. Any shred of social strategy is undermined by the fact that nobody is ever guaranteed to know the value of a painting, which gives you little reason to actually pay attention to what they're doing. They're probably just as clueless as you are. I just sit through this game, either making mindless bids that aren't backed up by any meaningful information because there isn't any, or just hesitating to bid at all because I don't don't know if I should or not. I have no idea what anything's worth, so why risk the money? I think a lot of people seem to agree that this game doesn't give players enough info to work with, and the most commonly proposed solution I've heard of this is to allow every player to know the value of every painting title, not just 3 of them. I agree that a change needs to be made here, but I don't think that should be it. If each player knew every title's value, then every time a painting was shown, people would just rush to find the closest matching title, learn the value, and then bid accordingly. Everyone can't know each painting's value, or you just get a bunch of situations where people break even with the assigned values and never go under or over. The social strategy and deception aspect would vanish completely. Instead, I think a good way to improve the game would be to still only give each player the value of 3 titles, but to also display a handful or every other possible painting title as well, alongside which player knows the value of each title. This way, you'd know all of the possible artwork titles, which I think you deserve to know, and you'd still have to figure out which title on the list matches the current painting, but then once you do, you're not just given the value right then and there, you're told which player you should watch, meaning that the way you bid has to be informed by their behavior. This would also increase players' incentives to actually draw their prompts well, since the closer the drawing matches its title, the easier it'll be to identify said title when the drawing comes up, and the easier it'll be to figure out who on the list you should be paying attention to. Right now, there's not much incentive to draw your prompt well at all. In fact, I'd argue that drawing poorly actually makes things more ambiguous for everyone else, which completely works in your favor. Ultimately, in its current state, I can't really bring myself to enjoy Bidiots. If they were to implement changes to give the players a bit more info and not leave them in the dark about everything, I could genuinely see myself enjoying this game. The concept is honestly really enticing, but as it stands right now, there's just way too much guesswork involved for me to find it enjoyable, and honestly, it just feels like a long, mindless slog. I bet there are plenty of people out there who can still enjoy this game despite the severe lack of information given, but as for myself, this has gotta be one of my least favorite Jackbox games to play. Quiplash is the Jackbox game. This right here is the series that a majority of people know Jackbox for. Much like Fibbage XL from Pack 1, Quiplash XL takes the already existing Quiplash, available separately as a standalone game, and embeds it into this party pack with added content. The game is very simple. It'll give you 2 prompts, stuff like, forget dogs, who is really a man's best friend? Or, you know you're famous when... Each prompt is received by 2 players, making it a head-to-head competition of who can type in the funniest possible answer. Once all the responses are submitted, players and audience members get to see everyone's funny responses and vote on which one was their favorite. It's not revealed who submitted which answer until after the votes are in, so it should be a flat-out, unbiased vote on who had the funniest joke. This goes on for 2 rounds before culminating in a final round that has every player answering the same prompt and then voting from the wall of everyone's submissions. This part was always sort of confusing for us when we played. You get 3 votes to allocate towards these answers, but you're allowed to use multiple votes on one answer if you feel like it. Basically, you can pick 3 of your favorite answers from the board, or you can give some extra love to a particular answer if you feel like it was significantly better than the other ones. But yeah, that's Quiplash XL. It's very, very simple and fun. It's easy to see why this series in particular is so popular. It's straightforward and something you could probably entertain anybody with. The only complaint I really have with the game itself is some of these prompts. They can be very hit or miss. A good handful of these prompts don't do a great job leaving a lot of room open for jokes. It can already be very difficult to frantically come up with a halfway decent joke on the spot while under a time limit, but it's especially hard when the prompt itself is super specific and not open-ended in the slightest. The amount of time I've wasted being the last person sitting there trying as hard as I could to make some whack-ass prompt into a funny joke is insane. Also, there have been plenty of instances where it was just abundantly clear that the prompts were designed for some target audience that my group just simply doesn't belong to. I could do without a lot of these weird reference prompts. I wish most of them were just universally understandable. But I will say, even when the prompts are bad, I can still definitely get a kick out of the jokes they produce. Having a few prompts in there that just kind of suck ass can definitely open up possibilities for stupid ironic humor, and a lot of the jokes that make us laugh do involve just blatantly making fun of the prompts we don't like or understand. I definitely prefer the good prompts that more easily set you up for funny jokes, but competing to see who can make the funniest joke out of some dog shit prompt is a challenge I can appreciate from time to time. All of that being said though, let's be honest, an egregiously bad lineup of prompts can absolutely ruin a game of Quiplash, no doubt about it. I have had some damn funny moments with this game. When it's good, it's really good, but when it's bad, it can be torture to sit through. Throughout our time playing all the Jackbox packs, I believe my group found that Quiplash 2 had the stronger prompt lineup, and while it's kinda hard to judge something like that, I feel like that's a pretty fair assessment. And that pretty much sums up my thoughts about Quiplash XL as a whole. If you have the choice, just open up Pack 3 and play Quiplash 2 instead. It's got better prompts, better music and visuals, and better games surrounding it. You'd still have a fun time playing this version as long as you don't get too unlucky with the prompts, but it definitely suffers from being overshadowed by its sequels. Ending off Pack 2, we've got Corp, the first game in the Jackbox series that involves working cooperatively instead of playing against each other. You and up to 3 others get a job at an office that specializes in defusing bombs, and they're gonna fucking explode if we don't do something about it. The way this works is that each bomb has a specific set of instructions on which wires need to be cut in order to safely defuse it. There are up to 4 pages of instructions per bomb, which are evenly distributed between each player, which means that to get the full picture, you'll have to communicate to each other what instructions you've got. These rules can be simple things like cut the first wire, cut all red wires, etc., but can also get a lot more complicated, like cut the wires in the order of the rainbow starting with red, or if more than 2 wires need to be cut, also cut the first wire, otherwise cut the 4th wire. Stuff like that can already be pretty difficult to process and figure out, but the big kicker is that many of the rules you get will be contradicted by the other player's rules and vice versa. You might have a rule that says cut all odd numbered wires, and another player might have a rule that says don't cut red wires even if another rule says you should, which means that now you have to cut all the odd numbered wires except for the red ones. Then later on, it just gets fucking insane. Like, there's a typo on page 1. It should say white instead of blue. Or, if the leftmost wire that needs to be cut is even, cut even wires before cutting odd wires. Otherwise, cut odd wires before cutting even wires. What are you saying? So everyone reads their rules in order, and using all the information you're given, and taking into account all the little contradictions and alterations, you and your group must figure out which wires need to be cut in order to defuse the bomb, which will explode if done incorrectly or if you exceed the time limit. The main game mode here is a story mode, which starts off easy and then gets progressively harder and harder the further in you go, adding new twists like having the rules being written by children, having the model number affect certain rules, and having the rules themselves get way more complicated, like that insane shit I just read to you. Along the way, you'll also encounter some other life-threatening minigames that'll explode on your ass if you mess them up or take too long. Stuff like typing numbers on a keypad, where players have to work together to figure out what each number in the 4-digit code is by communicating the rules to each other. Kinda like those number puzzles from elementary school, except this time, the hints are spread among each player, and also you fucking perish if you get it wrong. Then there's filing names in a filing cabinet, where each person has their own handful of names and have to work together to figure out how to sort them in alphabetical order, or sometimes even reverse alphabetical order. Sometimes you could be sorting by first name, and sometimes it's by last name, and many people will have very similar names, or just straight up damn near identical names. It can be very hard to communicate the correct order to your group when the names are split up like this, and man, there has gotta be some sort of inbreeding fiasco going on in whatever town this shit takes place in, cause how the hell are there this many? And then sometimes you gotta fix the copier, which involves completing a bunch of tasks on screen in order, with each task only being completable by one player. This one was pretty easy, but you just gotta make sure you don't complete a task while one of these lights is flashing, cause if you do. And lastly, there's making coffee, where there'll be an unnecessarily complicated set of rules spread among each player for how many of each ingredient needs to be added to the coffee. And just like the bomb, some of these rules will contradict each other, so you just gotta be very careful.
Hello there!
And that's about all the content you'll experience in Bomb Corp. Every day in the story mode consists of a handful of bombs, with occasionally one of those extra challenges being sprinkled in. It's completely random each time, so you can't rely on memory or anything to get through the game. Same goes for the extra mode, the grind, which acts as an endless high score mode containing all the activities you've experienced in the story mode. I gotta say, this is a game that really grew on me after playing it a bit more. Admittedly, I kinda wrote it off at first. When I played this during my group's little Jackbox marathon, where we played all the games in the series in order, I kinda felt like it was a bit mindless and boring even. We just took turns reading our rules in order, then worked out the little contradictions, and then cut the wires. The time limits were never that strict, and the rules hadn't gotten that complex yet. Before we even got to the real tough stuff, we figured we had already gotten the gist, and decided to just move on to the next game in the marathon. But later on, I decided to give this game a genuine try with only one person tagging along instead of a full group. We played through a majority of the story mode and got into the genuinely difficult stuff, and man, I just had way more fun with it this time. It got genuinely stressful and brain destroying. It got to a point where we were thinking harder than we've ever thought before, trying to just barely crack the solutions to these complicated ass puzzles before the timers ran out. This stuff genuinely fucks with your brain in the later stages. Bomb Corp is in an unfortunate situation because it's a good game, but it sticks out like a sore thumb in the environment of a Jackbox Party Pack. I don't think there's a problem with there being unique inclusions like this that do something different from the norm, but that's just inherently gonna limit its appeal when most people are looking for something funny or chill and not an intense cooperative puzzle game. This is the kind of game that my group just doesn't really see value in replaying, because once you've experienced it the first time, there's not much you really have to gain by doing it again. What's really gonna be different this time? Different bomb instructions? I guess this is why we saw no reason to get too far into it when we played it for the marathon. We had already gotten the idea, decided it was decent, but didn't see much reason to continue, since we didn't think it was going to give us anything new that we hadn't already gotten. Nobody ever feels like playing it, and we always end up skipping over it every time Pack 2 gets opened. But if you're the type of person who enjoys the frantic energy that comes with quickly trying to solve confusing puzzles, I do highly recommend sticking it out with this game until you reach the later levels. I still stand by my opinion of this game being more or less a one and done that I won't ever need to play again after this, but if you are going to play it, don't let the slow start deter you, because I genuinely had a good time with these later levels. This game's got nice presentation with funny characters, chaotic moments, and also had its difficulty nerfed in 2023, so if the game kicked your ass before then you might want to try it again now to see if you can take it on. Overall, this is a game that grew on me, and while I don't see much reason to play through it more than once, I had a pretty decent time on my once. So those were all the games in the Jackbox Party Pack 2. I'm not gonna lie, I went into this review thinking I was gonna have a bunch of bad things to say, but honestly, upon further inspection, nah, this isn't that bad of a pack. I still think it's kind of on the low end of the Jackbox Party Pack series, but I've come to realize that some of the games in this pack that I once wrote it off for are actually more fun than I initially thought. And hey, one unique thing about Pack 2 is that it's the only pack in the entire series that includes a Fibbage and a Quiplash, two very solid games that I'd say are must-haves for Jackbox fans. Then you've got Earwax, which is bad, but under the right circumstances, I mean, this one's not great. Bomb Corp is a pretty fun time once or twice, and Bidiots, I didn't like it. So pretty much, Fibbage and Quiplash are your safe bets for this pack, and everything else is sorta hit or miss. I think you should go for most of the later packs instead of this one, since the best games in this pack are given sequels in later ones, and the remaining games, frankly, aren't worth a whole lot in my opinion, in the grand scheme of Jackbox. One thing's for sure though, Pack 2 is a clear improvement from Pack 1. How clear of an improvement though, you might ask? Well, let's find out in the ranking board. Continuing my quest to build the ultimate Jackbox rankings list, I'm gonna go ahead and rank the 5 games available in Pack 2 before adding them to the mega list containing all the other games I've covered thus far. Beginning with our Pack 2 list, what better to go in the number 5 spot than Bidiots? There exists a universe out there in which I find enjoyment in this game, but with how little info you're given to justify any decision made in it and how long it drags because of it, I'm sorry to say that this universe ain't the one. Number 4, Earwax. Number 3, Bomb Corp. I had a hard time deciding how to arrange these two because while I definitely think Bomb Corp is a much better game, I don't know that my enjoyment of it is really gonna last. It's not the kind of game I can really see myself delving into again. Unlike Earwax, which as shitty as it is, I can see it being pulled out in the future for some ironic fun. Between these two, I would probably rather return to Earwax. But even with that being the case, I simply can't rank it above Bomb Corp. I don't feel the need to ever really play Bomb Corp again, but it is undoubtedly the more fun game. And Earwax is ranked above Bidiots because, unlike Bidiots, I can actually understand what's going on, and on very rare occasions, I'll actually laugh at this. Those occasions are rare though, and while they do bring me a lot of joy, most of the other moments I have with this game make me want to saw my ears off. Number 2, Fibbage 2. Number 1, Quiplash XL. The clear winners of the pack, but I like Quiplash the most for being a game that provides genuine laughs. Fibbage is fun, but if I had to pick one of these games to play right now, it'd be Quiplash. And now let's go ahead and mix these Pack 2 games in with the Pack 1 games I already ranked. Kablammo! Hey, look at that. It seems like the rankings are pretty evenly interspersed. That's fun. And now it's time to rank the overall packs I've covered thus far, once with my opinions and another time using math. I think it goes without saying that Pack 2 was a million steps up from Pack 1, and my opinion reflects that. Now for the mathematical list, what I'm going to do here is look at the ranked numbers of each game per pack and find their averages. Of course, the lower the average, the higher on the rankings that pack's games tend to be, so in this case, even mathematically, Pack 2 comes out on top, thank God. Well, that's about all the Jackbox Pack 2 I can handle. It honestly feels good to be done with... Oh, shit, Pete's calling. I wonder where the police took him. Hey, Pete, you good?
Flish, thank God. This is great. Alright, listen, man. They're only giving me one phone call, so we gotta make this a good one, alright?
Yeah, of course. What do you need me to do? I can...
Alright, so okay, I need you to set up a game of Bidiots. I've got the tab open, just shoot me the code when it's ready.
Are you...